as of recording this, the Sight and Sound poll of 2022 drops tomorrow, and I just wanted to give my last few thoughts on things that I wish comes to the list, my expectations for the list, and some shocking things that may occur with the list. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam, and let's get straight into it. I want to talk about my 3 wishes for the Sight and Sound poll of 2022. So my number 1 wish is that The Big Lebowski by the Coen brothers makes the top 100. It is one of my very, very favorite films of all time, like in my top 5 films of all time. And I just feel that there needs to be some Coen brothers representation on this list. And I could possibly see something like No Country for Old Men or even Fargo being more favorable with the voters, the critics for this poll. But for me, I would love to see The Big Lebowski. If I got to rub that magic lamp and have a wish for this list, I would love The Big Lebowski to be on it. My second wish is for an animated film to be in the top 100. There are currently no animated features in the top 100 of the Sight and Sound poll. Animation is such an important and has such a rich history with cinema, and it's shocking that there's absolutely no representation of animated films. My favorite animated film of all time is Akira from 1988, but I could see something like maybe A Spirited Away or one of the many classic Disney animated films making the top 100, if there any were to make it at all. But yeah, my second wish is for an animated film to make the top 100. And my third wish is for South Korea to have some representation on this list. There are so many masterful filmmakers from South Korea, the likes of Lee Chang-dong, Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook, Kim Ji-woon, and these directors have made some of the greatest films of the 21st century, and it would be criminal for none of these directors to have representation in this top 100, particularly things like Parasite or maybe Old Boy, are very, very popular and also incredible films. So I wouldn't be surprised, but also I would be surprised if they didn't make the list. So that's why I want to wish for them to be on here, just to give some representation for South Korea, because they have such fantastic cinema. So on to expectations. My first expectation is that, unfortunately, I feel that silent cinema is going to fall out of favor. That's not to say that there isn't going to be any silent films on this list, because some of them are stone cold classics and have stood the test of time. But I feel with the increased number of voters, an increased number of younger critics being asked to participate in the poll, that some of the classic silent films will be less high on the list, and even some of them will fall off the top 100. I don't want that to happen, but I just expect it to, just with the amount of films that have been produced in recent years, and just how, you know, trends go with what's popular and in vogue. And I feel that silent film is not as well regarded in some circles. So that's my first expectation. My second expectation is that the films of Edward Yang climb very high in this list. So currently we have Yi Yi at 93rd and A Brighter Summer Day 84th position on the 2012 list. And since this poll was released, the films have become widely accessible. The Criterion put out fantastic discs of Yi Yi and A Brighter Summer Day, and these films are just readily available for people to view. And that's going to be a big important factor into the voting of a lot of critics and how people are going to be voting, because a lot more films are readily available for people to see, a lot less harder to view. And this is a great example of 2 films that are some of the greatest films ever made. Particularly Yi Yi, for me, is probably in my top 25 films ever. And I highly suspect that these films will climb very high. Both of them will probably crack the top 50, maybe, we'll see. These lists can be very, very strange, and we'll never know what's going on here, but I strongly suspect that both of these films will be very high on the list. And my third expectation is that Mulholland Drive climbs the list a bit higher. So if you know me or follow the channel at all, you'll know that Mulholland Drive is my very favourite film of all time. and it currently sits at number 28 on the list. It's the most modern film on the list. I don't see it making the top 10, but I could potentially see it making the top 20 with the popularity of David Lynch and the popularity of Mulholland Drive. I expect it to be higher than 28. Now on to the shocks. What could be shocking about this list coming up? So my number one shock is that Vertigo will not be number one. We shall see, but I just don't think it will be. It was shocking that it knocked Citizen Kane off the top spot. That Citizen Kane held since 1962, so it held its throne for a very long time. And don't get me wrong, I think Vertigo is a very good film, but I just don't see it being number one again. And I don't see Citizen Kane being number one either. If I had to put my money down on something taking the top spot, it would be Tokyo Story by Ozu. One, because I prefer it over Citizen Kane and Vertigo, but just Ozu's work in general is just gaining so much more popularity and recognition. He's always been very popular, but just as time goes on, he's just a timeless film director. And yeah, my number one shock is that Vertigo is not number one. And maybe a follow-up to that Citizen Kane is also not number one. My second shock, or maybe not a shock to some, is that no horror films will make the top 100. So sadly, horror films generally are not well regarded by critics. They have a long history of classing horror films as, lower class art, and it's very sad to see, because horror is my favorite genre, although in my top 10 films of all time there's only one horror film in there, but that's neither here nor there. But I just feel that horror is such an important, and it's almost like the backbone of horror. It's always been there. It's never out of fashion. And yes, there are some terrible horror films, but some of the greatest films of all time, in my opinion, are horror films. And it's just sad to see that there is no representation of the genre in the top 100. And I really feel that should be changed. Such films as like The Exorcist or even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre should be in the conversation for being on this list, in my opinion, for their cultural impact and their aesthetic and just the filmmaking in them in general, and the performances, all very, very incredible. And yeah, so my shock is that there will be none, but I wish there were. So if I had an extra wish that I had at the beginning, my fourth wish would be a horror film makes into the top 100, but shockingly I don't think there will be. And my last shock is that Come and See makes the top 25 films of the Sight and Sound poll. So after having no representation on the list whatsoever, I feel that Come and See is going to crack the top 25 on its first introduction to the list in the top 100. It's widely regarded as one of the greatest war films ever made. Very harrowing experience for the viewer, and it's no more sort of important to view and understand this film than what's going on currently in the world. And the Criterion Collection, and not to keep going on about the Criterion Collection, but they made this film, they restored it, made it available, widely available for people to see, as previous transfers have been pretty poor. And yeah, it's just one of the highest ranking films on Letterboxd at the moment, in the social media film review app, if you don't have that or know what that is. And I think, yeah, as I mentioned with Edward Yang's films, Yi Yi and Bright Summer Day, things like streaming and video on demand and physical media are going to have a very important part to play in how critics are going to be voting for things, because there's never been a time where film has been more widely accessible, and the restoration work that's gone into films so that people can see them in good quality is just now. And in 2022, I think that's going to be reflected in the poll. So yeah, they're my quick thoughts on the 2022 poll, which is dropping. It may have already dropped by the time you watch this video. So I will be having a sort of roundtable with some of my friends who are on the Criterion roundtable with me. And we're going to discuss the poll in depth, go over some things that we're excited are on there, some things that have been missed out, some things that we're shocked that have left the list, and just to have a good old discussion about what's happened, and yeah, and then go from there. We'll have to wait till 2032 for another poll. So thanks for watching if you've made it this far, everyone. Until next time, take care.